Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who is joining me today for a live presentation on LinkedIn. So today I wanted to talk to you all about the negative effects of negative self-talk. Now, you must have, if you've joined me for my previous presentations, you would know that I've talked about how self-limiting beliefs can create that toxicity in you. So today I wanted to talk to you about why negative self-talk also creates a toxic effect in your life and at the same time creates these massively negative thought loops. So without further ado, let's get right into today's presentation, which I'm hoping is going to be quick for you to understand how the negative self-talk takes shape and how can you overcome it by giving you a few strategies and kind of helping you start that process of becoming more positive in life. So let me add the presentation to the screen and let me know where all of you are joining from. Hi, Melvin. It is really nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining today. Hi, Samuel from Uganda. So great to see you too today. And I hope that all of you get benefit from today's video and presentation for this live. All right, so let's begin by understanding what are some of the consequences of negative self-talk. Now, if you're indulging in negative self-talk, you would see yourself getting a lot of self-doubt, nervousness, apprehension. It affects your self-esteem and it creates a person who loses hope and creates this very awkward feeling within of how to deal with the world and how you can kind of stop yourself from projecting a negative self to everybody else. So I wanted to talk to you about the 8 types of negative thinking styles. And these include people who use all or nothing thinking, your mental filters, when we jump to conclusions, when we start to label ourselves, when we have the shoulds and the musts of our life, and when we're dealing with massive expectations from everyone around us. So let's get into these types of thinking styles where I give you an understanding of how these statements look like with different examples, different pictures, so you get a brief idea. I also wanted to welcome Lygia, Amjad, Moses, Melvin, Anisha, Samuel. Thank you all so much for joining today. And I hope, again, my hope is that all of you find benefit from today's session. So let's get into all or nothing thinking. Now, if somebody is utilizing this type of thinking, it's basically on a spectrum. You're either good or you're not good. And there's nothing in between. You never, ever give yourself leeway. So some of the examples could be, if I am not perfect, I have failed in life. Or if I am not successful, because I haven't slogged it out. So you are on the spectrum. There is nothing, you're not giving yourself even a little bit of kindness to, be yourself. And how does an all or nothing thinking develop? It develops by reinforced messages in your childhood. So, whatever you were told in your childhood, you internalize them as facts. And those facts are then translated as your belief systems. And those belief systems create your self limiting beliefs. So, all or nothing thinking is basically the top of the line negative thinking style. And it starts to govern the rest of the thinking styles that I'm going to be talking about. So, how do you start to overcome this type of a thinking style? First and foremost, I want a lot of you to start changing how you talk to yourself. Change your narrative, change the way you speak to yourself. I like to give this example of somehow when we are talking to our friends, we bring out like this compassionate, empathetic, kind self. But when we are ourselves going through something, we don't show that much kindness to anybody around us. So, why is that so? Why can't we be kind to ourselves? Why can't we show the same compassion, give ourselves the same leeway that we give so many people around us? And it is also to recognize that all of us have our strengths and weaknesses. The all or nothing thinking actually removes that. It only tells you to accept your strengths and remove all of your flaws, which humanly is not possible. So, to overcome this type of thinking, give yourself credit, give yourself the kindness you deserve, and tell yourself that you are unique. You have your own strengths, you have your own weaknesses. Now, sometimes when I am talking to my clients who are in this type of thinking, I ask them to start their day with positive affirmations. Now, some of the positive affirmations that have typically worked for my clients include, um, one second, they include, I'm going to be focusing on all of my positives today. I'm going to make a conscious effort to praise all of my work. I'm going to feel happy with everything that I achieve. And I am not going to put myself down for any mistake made. Now, these are just some examples that I've seen that have worked with my clients, but it is absolutely okay for you to go and find a positive affirmation that resonates with you. What is it that resonates with your thinking style? Start telling it to yourself every single day. When you wake up in the morning, tell it to yourself. And when you feel yourself falling into the trap of this thinking, then remind yourself of this positive affirmation. Now, sometimes it helps to have these affirmations stuck around your house, on your refrigerator, where you work, where you sleep, wherever you spend the most time in. Just put a positive affirmation there, remind yourself, and start dealing with this type of a thinking. Welcome, Anuj Patel. Welcome, Aspen from India. Welcome, Anisha. Welcome, all of you. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I will gladly answer any of those questions that I see in the comment section here. Unfortunately, I won't be able to reply back on the comment section if you're joining from LinkedIn, because for some reason the platforms don't allow commenting. But leave me a question here and I will definitely get to it. Now, moving along, the next one is a mental filter. Now, how does this work? Well, think of it as a prism of light. Light goes in, which means your information is going in. Your information gets filtered, and only the information you want to hear is being listened to. So, it's basically a prism of light. That's how I explain this to a lot of people out there. A mental filter just takes all the information that they are looking for, and then they just pay attention to that, create it as their thought loop, create it as their kind of set in stone kind of thinking, and they live by it. So, how do you overcome a mental filter type of a thinking? In a mental filter, you need to be mindful when this thinking style is in play. So, I've given a small example here so that you all understand how a mental filtering type of thinking can be overcome. So, let's say you were giving something in for work and you realize that here, for example, this girl says, Mr. Fred only gives me back negative feedback. Now, what's happened here? She has filtered her information in. Now, if she's mindful, she's going to stop herself within that second and say, is it really true? Is it true that Mr. Fred actually gave me negative information? Now, if you're a mental filter, I suggest kind of thinking that you're using a hammer and breaking down the thinking. That's why I have a little hammer on that prism. And then you tell yourself what was told to you in that meeting, which was everything else except that negative that you focused on. And sometimes it helps to write all of these things down. If you're anxious before a meeting and you feel that something negative is going to happen, take a pen and paper, write down everything that's happened, and then go back and provide evidence to your mind suggesting that that wasn't true, that that wasn't the only thing that was told to you. There was a lot of other positive that was mentioned in that meeting, which should reinforce a positive thought loop in your mind. So if you are using a mental filtering, this is exactly how it works. You take information in, you filter out whatever it is that you want to listen to, and everything else is put on the back. So be open also to listening to different perspectives, different opinions, different viewpoints, and this will definitely help you overcome the mental filtering type of negative self talk. Now, jumping to conclusions. Now, I know there are a lot of you here on the chat, just with a raise of hands or just from saying I do. How many of you have actually jumped to conclusions and made unnecessary kind of perceptions of other people or situations? Anybody, whoever it is, just let me know in the comment section. Now, in the jumping to conclusion style, you have two types of people. One, who are your mind readers, who kind of predict how you are actually going to feel, how this other person is going to feel or think or behave. Whereas what a fortune teller does is they predict the whole situation, and then they predict how they're going to feel in that situation. So it's a twofold type of a thinking when you are becoming a fortune teller. And it's so nice to see that Ricky, Dawn, Ligia, all of us, even I would admit that I have also jumped to conclusions pretty much in any aspect of my life. Now, I wanted to give you a quick example of how a mind reader would work versus how a fortune teller type of a person would work. Now, let's say you're going for a meeting with your manager. Now, if you are a mind reader, you will tell yourself, I made such a silly mistake. I am sure my manager thinks that I am a goofball, right? Now, you're predicting what the person is going to think. Now, if you are a fortune teller, you're going to tell yourself, I made such a silly mistake that my manager is going to call me out on this meeting and make me look bad, which in turn will make me look like a goofball, right? So in both scenarios, you are jumping to quick conclusions. One for a person's feelings, thinkings, behavior. For the other situation, it's predicting a whole situation. And to be honest, a lot of us are actually fortune tellers. We predict a future situation, assume what's going to happen, assume how we're going to feel, and then we just kind of let ourselves go with the flow and not focus on any other thing because we're predicting it's going to happen. And when it doesn't happen, we never call ourselves out on it. And this is exactly what you have to do when you are using a jumping to conclusions type of a thinking. So in this type of a thinking, I need you all to become a detective, which means you reassess the thinking and provide proof, which means if it did not happen, then there is your proof. There is that solid proof that nothing happened that your mind predicted or that you were kind of thinking as a future situation that is going to happen. Find another perspective to that situation. So if nothing of it happened, if your boss did not, for example, if I use the same example that I used before, if your boss didn't call you out on it, or the meeting went perfectly fine, but instead he praised you for some of the work that you did, then that is your different perspective. And that is what you need to hone on. And like I mentioned, it is all related to the all or nothing thinking. These are just basic variations of that one thinking. And after you have found yourself a different perspective, tell yourself, call yourself out and say, I was so wrong in believing that. That was absolutely not what happened. And give yourself that positive reinforcement that you are looking to get. Now, the next one are your labeling type of thinking. And this one is where we kind of label ourselves or we label people around us. Now, a lot of individuals who go through imposter syndrome are basically labeling themselves with a certain frame, a mind frame. And sometimes with that mind frame, we kind of start judging the whole world against that mind frame. So you could, probably judge a person on their bad day and think that's how they are, right? That's what a labeling type of thinking does. We kind of assume that whatever has happened either to us or the person in front of us is actually who they are at the core, rather than who they are in that whole being as like a whole being, like who they are. In one moment we've labeled ourselves and them, and we exclude everything else that is actually true to you or the other person or the situation or whatever it is that you have labeled. Labeling is one type of a thinking that reinforces the negative thought loops to the core. It almost sets it in a stone, where a lot of professional help is needed to undo and untangle the labelers, and it creates loops and loops of, I like to call it onion layers, because you're trying to hide below something and then you create some different layer on top because you're trying to hide the label that you have actually created for yourself. And this affects the self esteem and self confidence at a whole new level. A lot of young professionals, a lot of young adults, a lot of professionals, adult professionals, they label themselves, especially when they're successful. If you feel that you're succeeding in life, all of a sudden, I see a lot of my clients or professionals who come to me saying, I think it was just a fluke. I think this was just a one off. And that's not true. That is absolutely not true. Whatever success that you've achieved, whatever you've done in your life is through your hard work. But the negative thinking loop becomes so strong that it takes over and creates the feeling as if you're a failure, an imposter, or that some person that you're dealing with is not good enough, or they're, like the myth says, stupid. So be mindful when you're using this type of a thinking. Now, to overcome this thinking, again, it's a very, very important for you to become a detective again. It's a similar procedure to what I just mentioned before. Why are you addressing yourself in a certain way, or why are you addressing the other person a certain way, becomes a critical question in this type of a thinking. And in this type of a negative self-talk, it is rooted deep in your childhood experiences, your young adult experiences. So for example, if you were bullied in maybe your childhood or young adulthood, it is easily translated into your adult life when you don't believe yourself and consider everything around you as being fake, or you being a failure, or that you don't deserve anything in your life. So if you are using this thinking, try and explore a possibility of, you know, maybe it was just one moment that something happened to you. But in every other instance, in every similar looking situation, you were you and succeeded in life. And everything else within that scenarios that are similar looking, you were positive, you were happier. So remind yourself of all of those happy feelings that were very similar to that one situation. And finally, again, tell yourself, call yourself out on, I was wrong in calling myself that. I was wrong in believing that I was, so and so. So stop calling yourself names. That reinforces your negative self talk almost to a certain point. It almost gets set in stone, and it leads to all or nothing thinking, and it creates a loop, a negative thought loop, which requires professional help to overcome it. And next, Ligia mentions in our chat that overcoming bullying is very important to avoid negative self talk. And I completely agree with this. People who have gone through bullying have actually internalized the facts that a lot of the bullies have told them. So if a bully is constantly telling you you're a loser, you start believing it as if it's a true fact. Everything you do is actually measured upon you being a loser. And that makes you lose motivation. And again, individuals who are bullied obviously require help, professional help. They require any sort of help to remove that label from their lives. And it's very, very important to address that kind of thinking where it's coming from any of your childhood experiences. What was told to you? How was it reinforced? How did you internalize it? All of that takes shape when you are labeling yourself a certain way. Now, a one off of the labeling type of a thinking is an over generalized type of a thinking. And what this does is you take one whole scenario, which was negative, and you put it into another situation. And you kind of say all similar looking situations are going to have the same outcome. And that is what an overgeneralized type of thinking does. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to it. It means, if you didn't do well at something, then everything else it's not going to happen. So if you've utilized this thinking, if you've utilized labeling, let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions of how I can help you overcome them, I will answer them at the end of this presentation. In overgeneralized thinking, you will always hear yourself use words as always, never, everybody, and nobody. So, everybody hates me is an example. Nobody appreciates anything I do around my house, around my work. I will always fail at whatever I'm putting my mind to. I will never succeed in life. Now, these are not me coming up with these examples. These are examples that I've seen a lot of people out there use when they're using this type of a thinking, an overgeneralized type of a thinking. Always, never, everybody, and nobody. When you're utilizing these words, what is it actually doing? You're taking the responsibility off from yourself slightly and blaming the people around you, correct? Because you don't want to take responsibility of what happened to you. How did you feel? What happened in the past that made you feel this way? No, you don't want to do it. That's not acceptable in anyone's books to feel negative emotions. So we project it outwards and make everybody else responsible for how we are feeling. And when somebody utilizes this thinking, it creates kind of a bubble in their lives. The overgeneralized type of thinkers are the people who prefer staying in their comfort zones. You will rarely see these individuals come out of their comfort zones, try something new, or maybe meet new people. It is all about them protecting themselves in a bubble because all situations are similar looking. One negative situation equals a lot of negative experiences, even though that might never be true. So to overcome an overgeneralized thinking is check the accuracy of your statement, correct? For example, if you are telling yourself, I am never loved by anyone, just an example. How accurate is that statement? I am sure that in your life, there are people who actually love you. There are people who care for you. And here is where it becomes a little bit tricky because when you have people pleasers, when you have people who are trying to kind of always get other people's attention, it matters the most to them. And that's when I come in and say, how much is it true? How much do you want? Maybe say 1 million people liking you versus maybe the 3 that are the most important in your life. So check the accuracy of your statements. If you're telling yourself, I will always fail, have you always failed? I mean, how much proof do you have that you have always failed at something in your life? Probably not a whole lot. Maybe you did fail once, but then consecutively, you did do much better in life. Everything else measured up properly. It was amazing. But you're just looking to that one situation and not giving yourself credit that you did something well. You achieved it. You were successful. Next, understand if your expectations are realistic. How much of this expectation is set by you versus how much of this expectation is set by our society, right? Society, our people around us, are they setting expectations for us? Absolutely. With a lot of social media platforms and people on it constantly, the definition of success has changed completely. And if you agree, let me know. Do you think that the definition of success has changed? Probably, because success has started to mean having big cars and big houses, massive influencer kind of followers or following. Success has changed meaning over time, and that is where expectations start to not match up. They're no longer realistic. So you have to start asking yourself, how realistic are my expectations? And then change your language. So, for example, if you're telling yourself, I always have failed in my life, change your language to, I failed once in my life, but I have successfully did, and kind of do a bullet point on what all you've achieved. And that starts to reinforce your positive thought loops. It starts to create a dent in the negativity that is happening within your thoughts. So if you start reminding yourself every single day of everything that you've achieved, even if it's something small that you did, maybe you went out for a walk, that's a general statement. You've achieved it. You were thinking of doing it, you did it, and that changes your language, correct? Give yourself a break and do not fall into the trap of expectations from either yourself or the society, because that's where the overgeneralized thinking actually takes its roots from. And Ricky says she considers herself a reformed people pleaser. And but like any addition, it is a daily battle. I agree. It is always a battle to stop yourself from making other people feel good about themselves. And part of that thinking I'm going to be talking about, I think it's maybe the next two slides over, is the fact that we start to take responsibility of everybody around us, of how they should feel, think, act, behave. We start to feel that we are responsible for that feeling. But in reality, we are not. We're not responsible for how others feel. We are primarily responsible for how we feel, how we are doing within our own minds, and how we are growing as a person. We don't need other people's feelings. We don't need other people's negative energies. And part of the overgeneralized thinking also stems from trying to please everybody and trying to get everybody to, be like us, or, like, just be nice to us. And again, so going back to the overgeneralized thinking, always check the accuracy of your statements, question your expectations, and change your language. Now, the catastrophic type of thinking, how many of you have used this? I've used this. If things are not going my way, my automatic thought is, oh my goodness, how is this even happening? Right? You feel as if you've lost control of your situation or even your life if something doesn't go according to your plan. And some of the examples here is, this is so bad. I cannot believe this is happening. I've said it. So this is actually a personal kind of an example. And if I don't get this job, I am a failure. Correct? Now, with this type of a thinking, you can see that you've labeled yourself and you've utilized a catastrophic type of thinking, which means everything is bad. Nothing goes according to plan. And that is where the catastrophic thinking takes place. It is a thinking where we assume the unfavorable outcome and then how that unfavorable outcome might affect us. And that is when we want to control every single thing in our life. Cannot happen. When things go out of control is when we start to use the catastrophic type of thinking. Now, how does this thinking start? Well, it starts with reinforced beliefs in your childhood. What were you told about the world? What was it that you were told about people? And how were you told to manage your emotions when people were being, maybe say, mean or hurtful? So all of those kind of reinforced beliefs creates a catastrophic type of thinking, where suddenly if you feel that somebody is going to act a certain way, you are going to automatically tell yourself, this is like all ridiculous, I don't understand why this person is doing this, and you feel panicked. A catastrophic type of thinking is often seen in anxiety disorders and panic disorders. So if you are utilizing this kind of a thinking, it is, again, you have to determine the accuracy of your thought and understand which worldview you are utilizing for this catastrophic type of thinking. If your worldview was that people are always there to hurt me, then anything that anybody does to you creates a negative thought loop, your negative self talk, that they did this to me, they are responsible for how I feel, how can they do this, and so on and so on. And it becomes a loop which goes deeper and deeper and deeper. So determine where it came from. How did your catastrophic thinking come into place? And then determine if there's another way of viewing this whole thing that you've created out of proportion. So let's say if your friend says that maybe she doesn't want to meet you for a drink, a person with catastrophic thinking might think to themselves, "Oh my goodness, how is she not want to go for a drink? Did I do something last time? Did I make her feel bad? Did I do anything that, made her think that I'm not a good friend?" So that becomes a catastrophic thinking. And to overcome this, is there another way of thinking of why your friend said no? Absolutely. Maybe your friend was busy. Maybe she had some work to do. You do not know everything in everybody's life. So always give yourself, you know, the benefit of the doubt that everybody is not out to get you, and give others the benefit of the doubt that they are also not out to get you. And even gives the situations that have caused catastrophic thinking a similar kind of way of dealing with. So if you are thinking that every situation in your life goes out of hand, is it true? Does every situation go out of hand, or you feel that it is not in your control? Probably not. In all likelihood, you did have a lot of control in your life, and maybe one situation things felt like they were going out of place or chaotic, and you panicked. And that panic is enough to create this type of thinking. So, always be a detective with your negative self-talk, especially when you're utilizing a catastrophic thinking. Now, the next one is a should and must type of a thinking. Now, all of us use this. I am 100% sure that there's nobody here that hasn't used the should and must have type of a thinking. It is a type of thinking where we're putting expectations on ourselves. For example, I should have been more successful in my life by now. Or I should know what I want from my life. And again, all of these are expectations that were set maybe by, your parents, the society, the people around you, extended family members. And yeah, the extended family members are the one that actually create this type of thinking. So the should have and must have thinking is basically you putting unrealistic expectations on yourself, knowing 100% that these are going to be the most difficult expectations to fulfill. And it creates a fear and worry inside of you, and you're constantly feeling anxious. A few days ago, I met somebody who was telling me that, they've just turned 40 and they feel like they haven't achieved anything in life. And I looked at them and said, well, you have. You're the VP of the company that you work for. You are a successful person. So where is your thinking coming from? And then this person listed out some of the things that they had probably thought years ago that they would be doing as of now. But again, those expectations were set so far back that to live up to them now and kind of measure your success to a younger version of yourself, is where people get stuck in this type of thinking. There's no shoulds, there's no musts in this in your life. Everything that starts with I should have this, I must do this, is basically coming from other people around you. And Lygia is right. When you're raised by a very demanding system, the expectations of how you should feel and how you should handle yourself becomes very difficult to navigate. And this is when, and this is when I tell a lot of people that no, you don't have to live by any expectations. You have to live by what you feel is going to be the best for you. The world is ready to throw like 10,000 things at you. If you don't have, say, a car or a big house, or not successful, or you're not doing, like for youngsters especially, not knowing what they want from life is an expectation in itself that they feel burdened about. So why put so much expectation on anyone? Because that expectation in their young adulthood actually starts translating into their adult life, in their professional life, where they're doing like a check mark of things of I need to do this by maybe 35, I need to do this by 45, by 50 I need to have this much, by 60 I need to have this much. It's almost as if they're running their life on something that somebody else set for them, and they stop living their life in that moment. And that's what should and must have type of a thinking does to people. It makes them believe that they need to slog it out, they need to work twice as hard to achieve everything, to achieve happiness. That's what the core of this thinking is. The core of this negative self-talk is people want happiness, so they label things in their life as being shoulds and musts. A car is a must, a big house is a must, good clothes is a must, something else could be a must in your life. Whatever it is to create happiness within you. And that is where I want to tell you that it is not. Happiness doesn't come from creating the shoulds and musts in your life. All it does is create anxiousness, panic attacks. Many people go into depression disorders because they're not living up to expectations. So, how do you deal with the should and must type of a thinking? Identify your triggers. What triggered your should and must in that moment? When you are telling yourself, I should have done this or I must have this, what was the trigger? And then how much of this was your expectation versus how much was it the expectation of the society around you? That you should have done this and you must have whatever they want you to have in life. And then analyze if it is realistic. How realistic are these expectations? Probably not, because it's putting so much burden on you that it has created negative thought loops, negative emotions. A lot of people with should and must have thinking actually go through guilt, shame, anger, embarrassment because they feel that they haven't achieved as much in life. So remove this type of thinking by asking yourself, are you being kind to yourself? Are you showing compassion to yourself? And then telling yourself, I'm okay. And then reminding yourself of everything that you've achieved, everything that you've done so far. What is making you truly happy in life starts to break the should and must thinking. And I consider it like a glass. So once you start putting a dent in the glass, it eventually breaks. You eventually break yourself free from expectations from anyone around you and even yourself. So be kind to yourself. Don't fall under the pressure of what people around you are telling you to do or what you have reinforced as belief from your childhood. And now, this one, the final unhelpful thinking style is your personalization, which is very, very closely related to the labeling kind of a thinking. Except in this, we feel guilt and shame for things that are not in our control and we sort of take accountability for how people should feel around us. And to Ricky's point, when I was telling you that I'm going to be telling you about this type of thinking, this one is closely related to the labeling type, because we are trying to make everybody feel happy around us. And we take away from the fact that we cannot make everybody feel happy around us. We are only responsible for our happiness. So, how can we be responsible for how other people are feeling, behaving? We cannot. And so we turn that situation, or we turn that whole person that has made us feel this way into something bigger. And that creates a bigger negative thought loop, a negative self talk in our mind, that we are not good enough for the people that we are trying to please. Or we're taking responsibility of things that are not within our control. How did I let this happen? Well, it just happened. You couldn't kind of keep all the variables in your mind. You thought about every single thing that could have happened, but something else happened, and that was not in your control. So, personalization is basically you trying to get in control of everything around you, and at the same time taking responsibility of people around you. And that's putting too much pressure on one's self. How can we live with such a massive burden of thinking? We cannot. So, to overcome this type of thinking, start being mindful. And it's actually catching yourself in that moment when you're trying to say, you know, I don't know how this could have happened. That's when you catch yourself and say, I couldn't have known this would happen. This is how you start to deal with it. Do not take it to your heart if things are not under control. Whatever happened, say, in your past is not going to be affecting your present until and unless you let it. And you are not responsible for how others feel. And most people who struggle from personalization type of thinking require professional help, because like I said, this one is probably your core of the onion layer, and everything else that I've talked about is actually the layers covering it. When we take responsibility of other people's actions and words and behavior and feelings and thoughts and emotions, we are actually not giving ourselves a chance to feel those things. We're not giving ourselves a chance to kind of, you know, feel that we're not going to help them. They only have to help themselves. We feel that we can go out of our way and do things to make this other person feel happy. Which brings the next critical question is, why is it so important to make a certain person happy in your life? Why is it so important that you have everything in your control? And those are critical questions that a professional allows you to kind of dig deep and figure out when this took place. What were the circumstances that all of this happened? And seek professional help. Don't feel shy. If your negative thought loops have taken over, especially personalization, then it is time that you start figuring out how you can bring yourself out of this loop. And I haven't mentioned this because I wanted to mention this actually separately. One of the best ways to label your negative self-talk is actually give it a different name altogether. So this is what, when we're counseling children, we tell them, and I feel that it works for adults as well, is when you feel your negative thought loop in play, give it a name. So a lot of the times I suggest devil 07, the devil, the 007, because it's just a mixture. It's a fun play on words. So when devil 07 is kind of in play, you have to be mindful and stop it and utilize every strategy that I've said. Ask it questions, find accuracy, seek evidence that prove it wrong, and stop the negative self-talk. It helps to kind of physically remove that negative self-talk and give it another name, so it feels distant. And once it starts to feel distant, it becomes easier to deal with. It feels easier to tackle with. And it works. It actually works because you start to provide proof to this negative self thought, this negative self loop, and start to feel better about yourself. Now, I am a counselor myself and a life coach. So if you feel that this thinking has, started affecting your day-to-day life, then do reach out to me. You can DM me on LinkedIn or connect with me on LinkedIn, and then we can chat. And my hope is that through this presentation, you were able to figure out all of the negative thinking styles that we live by. And it's important to note that we don't live with all of them. We live with at least 2 or 3 of them. So even for you to have the capability of understanding those unhelpful thinking styles is a step in the right direction, because then you know exactly what you're doing, and then you know exactly how to deal with it. So I hope that you all found benefit, and that reach out to me. Let me know how you felt this presentation was, what connected with you, what helped you, what did you resonate with. I always appreciate feedback, so let me know. And I thank you all for joining today, and I look forward to seeing you here for my next live. And till then, see you soon. Have a great Easter, great weekend. Bye bye.